Welcome to another edition of Kop Talk, and it's the last Kop Talk of 2011. We hope you've had a good 2011. With me, as always, is Bob Cohn, and he's going to grill me today, so we'll see what he's got in store.
Larry, this is the time of year when people compile their best stories, top stories, worst movie types of stories. Are there any stories that stand out in your mind at the world, national, or local level that would belong in the top three in 2011?
Well, I certainly think the moving tectonic plates in the Middle East are clearly one of the major stories of the year. What's going to happen in the aftermath of Arab Spring, what's going to happen with the concurrent social unrest in Israel over social issues, over gender discrimination. It seems like there's an overall kind of buzz in the air through the entire region that things are moving toward something different than what they've been over the last half century. Israel's having immense social change now. Be interesting to see if the labor and right and far right coalition can hold in the Knesset, if Bibi Netanyahu remains the prime minister going into and through 2012. A lot of change in the air. The second is the protests in this country from the left, the Occupy protests, which really caught the right by storm and somewhat unawares. And it really provoked a groundswell of people who started to react very strongly to the notion of economic segregation in this country and the disparity in wealth between the very, very top percent or 0.1% of the population and the so-called bottom 99. The third story of the year, which I would put personally number one, but I think it would be a little unfair because it's only my own predilection, is the Cardinals winning the World Series.
Well, I certainly can't argue with that. And we do not take political stances, nor do we endorse candidates here at the Jewish Line as a matter of policy. However, we do comment on behaviors and statements of various candidates. And have you been as concerned as I have been about the very overtly and strongly kind of militant, triumphalist Christian messages that are coming out of Texas Governor Rick Perry's campaign and among several of the other Republican campaigns who are, and the kind of assault on the Engel against Vitelli separation of church and state principle that we thought was a settled matter of law?
I'm worried about that a lot. I'm worried about the two other aspects of what's been going on in the campaign. One is the blatant pandering, and then just what I would call the non-presidential kind of stature of some of the candidates. Newt Gingrich most particularly. You know, when he opens his mouth, you never know, what's coming out, whether it's something haughtily intellectual or a water cannon, intended to douse his opponents. And regardless of what you think politically, I think we need a president who is able to evoke a feeling of presidential stature and security when they speak and when they lead. We've just seen a lot of finger pointing and jabbing between the candidates. On the religious issues, on the pandering issues, and on the presidential stature issues, all of them give me great concern.
And it's a good thing Gingrich only has 2 feet because they're both shoved firmly down his throat.
Yeah.
It appears that if a candidate in a debate says something responsible, then he has to walk back from it 2 or 3 days later, lest he be mistaken for somebody who's, heaven forbid, a moderate and reasonable person.
And I think Mitt Romney is being very careful because he knows if he pulls this rubber band too tautly to the right, what's he going to do in a month or two when he has to come back and run against Obama and try and reach the great middle, the great 20% that will be the determiners of who the next president's going to be.
Also, I had a kind of grudging respect for Ron Paul, even though I strongly disagree with his isolationist stance. But the newsletters that bore his name, that called Martin Luther King Day a hate whitey day, and there were blatantly anti-Semitic references, and his kind of lame excuse was that he didn't bother to read a newsletter with his own name on the nameplate. There's another kind of a breaking news story over the past couple of days, and I'd be interested if you shared some of my concern. This breathless announcement of Russ Cornhan, understandably, was very pleased with the Boeing $30 billion deal for Saudi Arabia to purchase some fighter jets. Should we be pleased that we're supporting a regime where women cannot drive, which exported the Taliban and Al-Qaeda to other areas through bribery? I mean, how should we feel about this?
No, I mean, it's the enemy of my enemy approach, and it doesn't work. We saw fist clenching and pumping with Saddam Hussein 25 years ago.
Exactly.
Then he became our enemy, and we saw the Taliban, who actually were in some ways our friends and then became our enemies, and it's happened over and over in the Middle East. So no, it gives me great pause. I haven't seen quite the pro-Israel rhetoric that we've seen in the past on this particular deal, which tells me maybe there's a little bit more reassurance under the table on the Israeli side,
yes.
But on the civil rights and civil liberties side, it gives me just as much pause as it always has.
And of the latter point that you wisely made, Saudi Arabia is more afraid of a nuclear Iran possibility than they are of an existent nuclear Israel. Happy, healthy New Year.
Happy New Year to you,
as well.
to all of you. Thanks to everyone who puts this together and puts the light together. To Aggie, our producer, and we'll see you next year. Take care.